It's working. Okay. Our story so far. Right? Sometimes I really feel like during this Joseph cycle that it's one of the old Lone Ranger shorts where, you'd get 10 minutes of action and then it would pause and, be on the edge of the cliff, and then 10 minutes of action and it would pause and you'd be in front of the train that's coming barreling down. So when last we left our intrepid heroes, Benjamin had been accused of theft, and he was going to be made a permanent slave of this wacky vizier, secretly Joseph, and the brothers were free to go. And they don't want that. And instead, Vayigash, Judah steps forward. He comes forward and he makes the most beautiful and impassioned plea that we're not going to read together, but you should be reading on your own, to convince this crazy Egyptian to take himself instead and allow Benjamin to return to their father, because anything else would be too cruel. And that's when Joseph reveals himself. Finally, after a few weeks, he reveals himself to the brothers and explains exactly who he is and says, don't worry, God sent me down here to prepare for everything, because there's still going to be another 5 years worth of famine. So bring everybody down. Good? Good. So what next? What's the main stumbling block? Right? You're the brothers, and you've just learned that this guy is your brother, and he's not dead. In fact, he's number 2 in charge of the entire country, and you've learned there's 5 more years of famine coming, and you've learned that he's forgiven you. So what's next? What do we have to do?
Tell the father?
Okay. Guess what, Dad?
The coat that you got with all the blood on it? I don't know. What are you going to say?
So what do you say to Dad? Now, we can come up with some scenarios that how they can kind of exonerate themselves. Well, we found the coat, and so we assumed he was dead, and someone else must have, attacked him or taken him as prisoner and blah, blah, blah. But we've discovered him. I mean, after all, Joseph seems willing to forgive, so maybe he's not going to blab to Dad about how it all went down. But if you're the father, what do you do? What possible way would you accept that the son, who 20 years ago, or 22, I believe precisely, was taken from you, is alive and doing well, and all you have to do is move to Egypt? Yeah, and I got some Florida land to sell you, right? That really, I'm supposed to pack up the whole family and move down to Egypt now? It's going to take some convincing, right? Okay. And that's what we're going to look at. How do you convince Dad? So we're in Vayigash, of course, chapter 45, and we're going to pick up with verse 16. This is just after Joseph has told the brothers, I'm Joseph, and the famine's going on, so everybody move down. And so now we're going to pick up with the preparations for making that move so everyone can come down. All right, so we're on page 278, chapter 45, verse 16. 278, yes. Good? All right, Harriet, I know you're a good dramatic reader. The news, 16.
The news reached Pharaoh's palace. Joseph's brothers have come.
Everyone is stunned. This guy has family. He was a slave in Potiphar's house, and he's got family. Okay.
Pharaoh and his courtiers were pleased. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, say to your brothers, do as follows. Load up your beasts and go at once to the land of Canaan. Take your father and your households and come to me. I will give you the best of the land of Egypt, and you shall live off the fat of the land.
All right, so it's good because Joseph had kind of already promised this, but Pharaoh agrees. He ratifies. He simultaneously comes up with his own plan, which is go back, bring your families. You're going to have it good here. Right? You will be basically guests of Pharaoh, which you can't really get much better than that. All right, so that's another stumbling block removed. So we're paving the way.
And add this also. Do as follows. Take from the land of Egypt wagons for your children and your wives, and bring your father here, And never mind your belongings, for the best of all the land of Egypt shall be yours.
All right, the great immigrant offer. Right? Just load yourselves up, leave behind the shtetl, because you're not going to need that stuff when you get to America. The streets are paved with gold, right? And who's going to want your old kettle when you're here and you can have a gold kettle? Gold really wouldn't work for a kettle, but you get the point. Pharaoh is being incredibly magnanimous, right? Extremely, extremely generous. And he's even saying, don't tell me that you don't want to come because it's too far for the kids and the women folk. Here are some wagons that you can put them in.
Is this suggesting that he's really grateful to Joseph for what Joseph has done for his country, for Egypt?
For himself. I mean,
he recognizes it and is actually aware and very grateful to Joseph for it, not taking it for granted or saying, you owe me.
I don't think you could find a more generous statement of gratitude for Joseph has been wonderful. Of course, his whole family can come join us. I mean, he may or may not have realized this was going to be 70 people, but with 12 brothers, he had to imagine it was a pretty good-sized family, because remember, they are adults. But he clearly has been so pleased with everything, he is willing to extend this. Good? Questions?
Plus, Joseph said, and I'm going to live actually in Egypt, in Goshen.
Right, which is...
Goshen is a little away.
It's not mainstream Egypt, exactly.
Yeah.
And
so it's not too concerned about it.
And indeed, if you read through further sections of the parasha, which we won't get to today, it's very clear that Joseph is aware that his family could be not exactly a problem, an embarrassment. I mean, not an embarrassment, it's just the Egyptians have different ways. And they're a bit,
Behind.
Yeah, well, they're just so Hebrewish, rather than modern, sophisticated Egyptians. And yes, if you think I'm also pointing back to the 1900s when the Jews who were already in America saw their shtetl cousins getting off of the boat and went, all right, first thing we need to do is get you a haircut and some new clothes and get you to stop speaking Yiddish and all the other things that were there to clean up the new immigrants. You see it here first, but we still got this issue of dad. We still got this issue of the return journey and then back again to Egypt. Okay, onward.
The sons of Israel did so. Joseph gave them wagons as Pharaoh had commanded, and he supplied them with provisions for the journey. To each of them, moreover, he gave a change of clothing. But to Benjamin, he gave 300 pieces of silver and several changes of clothing.
So he's still playing favorites, but it's his full brother, and everybody seems to be okay with that.
Yeah. And to his father, he sent the following: 10 he asses laden with the best things of Egypt, and 10 she asses laden with grain, bread, and provisions for his father on the journey. And as he sent his brothers off on their way, he told them, do not be quarrelsome on the way.
What an interesting comment. We're going to come back to that. But the idea of don't fight during the journey. Don't argue with one another during the journey. What would they perhaps be arguing about? But notice he's sending an awful lot to his dad. But why? I think of this from a packing perspective.
Oh, packing, because otherwise they have famine where they come from, so he may not have enough food to last the entire journey back.
All right, so sending food, no problem. But sending him the commodities of Egypt? I mean, he's just going to have to turn around and carry it back to Egypt with him. Right? That'd be like saying, come and live with me in Florida. Here, let me give you 800 pounds of oranges that you can then carry back with you when you come to Florida. No, you keep the oranges here, and when they show up, you can let them have the. Why would Joseph be sending so many gifts that apparently are just going to have to turn around and come back?
To pursue his father.
To persuade him, right? To persuade him that it's good, right? You're not going to come here and be refugees. Remember, they're leaving behind the land of milk and honey, right? They're leaving behind the land of the covenant, even if it's just supposed to be for 5 years. So Joseph has to convince his father that leaving that behind is worth it. That not only are they going to get through the famine, but it is so rich here that they don't even have to worry about what they're leaving behind because what's here is so much better. That's a very persuasive, materialistic argument. and one that is often made, I'm sure many of you are aware of, when kids will often encourage parents to come move or live somewhere. They'll often give the materialistic argument. Oh, it's so much warmer here. It's so much nicer here. You know, the shops are so much closer. You don't have to worry about this or that or better public transportation. But for the older people that are thinking of moving, what about my friends? What about my life that I have? Right? So Joseph is persuading the way Joseph might want to be persuaded, which is with cash bonus. But we'll see whether or not that's enough.
And also he's persuading without any conversation. He's persuading with the material goods, the impressing them.
It's all arranged.
It's all done.
Yes.
Yeah, it's all done.
And
it's not convincing him through words how beautiful it is or how wonderful it is. He gives it to him.
It's assumed.
Yeah.
Right? And
he actually, because what if he didn't send all that stuff? Then he's just sent, he's just made this persuasive argument, but where's the proof in it?
Right.
He's actually setting the proof with them.
But again, on the other hand, if you're an elderly person, which Jacob definitely is, you still have your own dignity, your own pride, and you still want to make choices for your own life. I mean, Jacob is still the patriarch. He is still the head of the family. I'm not sure that he's going to be exactly ready to jump on the wagon, just because Joseph sent along a big cash incentive, because that seems like he's taking some of the decision away from him. So we're going to have to see what the reaction is.
So they went up from Egypt and came to their father Jacob in the land of Canaan, and they told him, Joseph is still alive. Yes, he is ruler over the whole land of Egypt. His heart went numb, for he did not believe them. But when they recounted all that Joseph had said to them, and then when he saw the wagons that Joseph had sent to transport him, the spirit of their father Jacob revived. Enough, said Israel. My son Joseph is alive. I must go and see him before I die.
All right, so what convinces him?
The wagons of stuff.
The wagons of stuff.
Yeah. Otherwise, he thinks the boys are just yakking.
I think the idea that his son is still alive, that will convince him. He wanted to see him.
So it doesn't matter what the gifts are. I just want to see my son again. Yeah. He could have sent one donkey, and I would have, if he was alive, I would have ridden a donkey to go see him. So why look at the wagons? I mean, as Harry pointed out, the text is kind of, right? They recounted all he had done, and when he saw the wagons that Joseph had sent, the spirit of their father revived.
Once he saw the wagons of stuff, then he got happier, because otherwise you tell him, get up from everything that's familiar, move over here, we promise you it'll be fine there. As she said, just promises. But once he saw the wagons, wow, this is nice. And I'm going to see my son. That helped him get to that point.
So you're reading them as two things. One is, I get to see my son, and there's a lot of stuff.
But the fact about the stuff made him also realize that his kids were telling him the truth, because they said Joseph is this ruler.
Right.
So it proved that what they were saying was true, so that he could then believe it, because the last time they spoke to him, they lied.
So the wagons were a proof of Joseph's, or proof of the brothers' honesty, that Joseph was alive.
Right.
Because like you said, the last time they gave news of Joseph, it was the opposite. And that then was, not that he was attracted to the stuff, but it proved.
The wagons didn't have the stuff. The stuff was on the asses. So he saw the wagons as a means of transportation.
So the wagon was the equivalent of the plane ticket.
Yeah.
Right? Look, you already got a ticket, first class. Right? And again, that was proof of Joseph's living. Right. And it wasn't necessarily the enticement, it was simply proof of his existence. Really, a wagon would convince you? I mean, the brothers couldn't have just robbed somebody, stolen a few fancy wagons, and I mean...
But as you say, it's the plane ticket.
The wagons are just so, because how in the world could they get wagons without Joseph being alive? Why would wagons be so, I mean, we're talking about wagons now. Pharaoh mentioned the wagons. Joseph got the wagons ready. He sees the wagons. You see where I'm going with this? The wagons matter. Yeah. And lo and behold, the Hachamim, the sages, also noticed the wagons. And
I'm sorry. Is there something also too, that it's Israel that said that, not Jacob?
Yeah.
Isn't there some reference when they refer to him as Israel? And so there's some other connotation that's supposed to be understood with that?
There is always this tension because unlike Abraham, who once he becomes Abraham is never mentioned as Avram again, Yaakov, when he becomes Israel, goes back and forth between the two. And there's lots of different commentaries of what mode he's in, of what spiritual state he's in when he uses different names, which we might want to interpret. But I want to hit this wagon, at least with the words of our sages, and see the way they went. So our first text, and you're going to have to hold on. We got a little bit of Hebrew here in order to get the play on words.
Rabbi Levi said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan ben Shaul, Yosef said to his brothers, if Yaakov believes you, fine. If not, tell him as follows. When I departed from you, we were not engaged.
Were we not?
Oh, were we not engaged in the parasha of Eglah Arufah? Hence it says, when he saw the wagons,
Ha'agalot.
the spirit of Yaakov, their father, revived.
All right. So let me unpack that.
Yeah.
So Joseph says, the last thing Dad and I were talking about was the Eglah Arufah, which is translated as the broken-necked cow. Right. So this is a later halacha that comes in later on in the Torah about when you find a body in the middle of a field and there's no indication of the murderer, you measure to the closest town. The elders bring out a cow. There's a little ceremony, and they break the neck of the cow at that spot, and they say, "We did not shed the blood." That's the synopsis. And Joseph is saying that the last time he and Jacob were together, 22 years ago, that was the last thing they were studying together, was this broken neck cow situation, right? And as you can see, the word eglah, right, can be the same word for wagon.
And what is it? Oh, if it's not wagon, it is, what does Eglah mean? Cow?
It's a heifer, yeah.
Heifer.
Yeah, it's a young unworked cow.
Oh, Eglah's a cow?
Yeah. Right, so bada bing, bada boom, the wagons were a visual aid reminder of their discussion of some other halacha. It's just that obvious.
Yeah, of course.
Right? It's okay, hold on. Wait a minute. The rabbis are saying that Jacob and Joseph were discussing halacha that would be given in the Torah hundreds of years later, and that the wagon was a good enough reminder that Jacob would go, only Joseph would know that. Right? No matter what lies or whatever deception has happened here, only Joseph would know that our last conversation together, when I was sending him off to go, check on his brothers, only he would have known what we had discussed. And only he would have planted this secret message. He didn't even tell the brothers. He did it by just using the wagons, as if we don't have wagons in Canaan, right? And that was his coded message, that if I didn't believe the brothers, I would at least believe the wagons, because it would show me that he remembers what we had been studying, and he would know that I would remember what we had been studying, and I'll get it through the wagon.
There's some parallel too with what they had been studying and what his brothers had done to him.
Oh, we're getting there. Absolutely. We're not done yet, right? Because we're gonna have to unpack. Well, what is this Eglah Arufah? What is that halacha about, and how do the rabbis understand it, and how does it then tie in to why that would have been an extremely appropriate section for them to have been studying before all of this happened? So let's go ahead and see what that actually is talking about.
When Jacob sent Joseph to his brothers, he accompanied him on the way. Said Joseph, "Father, turn back, so that I should not be punished for troubling you." Said Jacob to him, "My son, in this very matter, my descendants will blunder when they do not arrange a proper escort for a traveler and he is killed, and they will have to bring an Eglah Arufah and proclaim, 'Our hand did not spill his blood.'" All
right. So, of Eglah Arufah, it's discussion of levaya, of escorting somebody, right? How many people here, when you have house guests, when it's time for them to go, you just wave to them and they walk to the door and they leave. They show themselves out, right?
No, you walk them to the.
Of course not. You walk them to the door at the very least,
And then you walk them out.
or then you walk them to the car, and then you stand and talk at the car for another half an hour, right? It's, at least if you're anything like our family, the leaving is a process. It's not just, bye, thanks for coming. And that levaya, that act of escorting a traveler, of helping them to leave your district, is the topic that Joseph and Jacob would have been talking about, because precisely what was Joseph doing at the time when they last were seeing each other?
Well, wasn't he about to go check on his brothers
Yep.
and see what they were doing?
He was leaving.
And Jacob was sending him to check on his brothers.
And Jacob would not send Joseph without escorting him on the way to help begin his journey. So Jacob was saying, I'm going to walk with you as we start. And Joseph said, oh, no, Dad, don't bother. I mean, really, I don't want to make you go to any length, because what kind of son would I be if I made my father have to walk with me as I was leaving? And Jacob says, shut up. You let me walk with you because this is an important thing, right? Levaya, the escorting of a visitor, of a guest, of somebody that is leaving. This is a very important mitzvah. So that was their conversation.
With the leaving that Joseph was doing, was his father was sending him to check up on his brothers.
He was still departing.
Well, he was, but his father didn't want to check up himself. I don't know why.
Well, he delegated.
He delegated
Yeah.
it
I mean, he trusted Joseph to go off and do this.
and spy on the brothers. Well, he said, come back and tell me what they're doing. I don't trust them.
Well, you didn't say the word, I don't trust them.
I mean, why else do you send him to go look at what they're doing? He didn't
Well,
say, go help them
hold on.
herd the sheep.
Perfectly innocent reason, right? You have the brothers off doing some shepherding in one place. You don't want to make one of the brothers have to come back and report, because that takes them away from the work. You send Joseph to go off and check, and he can come back because he's not doing anything else. Right? He's a messenger, that's all. What's that?
He wasn't doing anything.
He wasn't doing anything anyway. And there's some other issues there like we've talked about before with regards to the favoritism. All right, so let's get
So I'm
back.
studying with his dad.
Right.
And his dad was like, give me a break, go out there and play like your brothers.
But even as he left him with words of Torah.
Mhm.
Exactly. And the Torah was about escorting someone as they left, because if you don't, then you end up having to do this egla arufah. You have to do this ceremony of breaking the neck of this young cow in order to say, we didn't kill this person who's in the middle of nowhere. Wait, how? What? How did we make a connection there yet?
Well,
Right,
but then
so-
then the brothers have to come back and say, Joseph died in the middle of nowhere, he was killed.
All right, so,
They gotta go back and tell the father that.
this midrashic connection is kind of odd, right? We got Joseph and Jacob talking, and they're leaving. And leaving means we have to talk about escorting. But then it introduces this idea, right? Now, escort equals dead cow.
Kind of skipping the
And
person.
this is kind of a big question of, wait a minute, how do you get from no escort equals to dead cow, or more specifically, dead stranger, right? Or dead person in no man's land.
Because I should have escorted the stranger out of my territory. Well,
All right, well, let's go ahead and take a look, because surprise, surprise, the Talmud tries to explain this for us.
The elders of that town washed their hands with water at the place where the neck of the heifer was broken, and they would say,
As it says in Deuteronomy,
our hands have not shed this blood, and our eyes have not seen it.
and then the Talmud asks the very good rhetorical question,
Can it enter the mind of anyone to think that the elders of the court are shedders of blood?
why in the world would they say during the ceremony of the Eglah Rafah, we didn't kill him, you were not the prime suspects, right? What good is it for you to tell us that you did not kill this body? We know you didn't kill the body, or else, we're completely wrong about who the proper elders of our court should be. So why would they make that declaration?
Because we must therefore say that what this means is he did not come to us and we sent him away without food, and we have not seen him and left him without an escort. So we are taught in the Baraita, he did not come to our hands when we sent him without food, nor did we see him and leave him without an escort.
Right? So the escort, right? The escort is supposed to protect and feed. All right, let's take apart those two pieces. What is the relationship between protecting the person that's traveling and them ending up dead? This one's obvious. Say it for me, please.
We didn't protect him.
We didn't protect him, right? So if we protected him, he wouldn't have ended up dead. Therefore, if we had seen him, if we had met him, if we knew that he was coming through town, he wouldn't be dead because we would have protected him. And the food?
Well, you're in the middle of the desert here. You could die of starvation too.
You
You need to
could,
feed him.
but the Egla Arufa is not about if you find a dead
No.
person from starvation.
No, it's
This is if somebody has been murdered.
Right, it would be murdered.
Sages step in, and another part, and I didn't unfortunately have the room to balance this all out. I can do it verbally. And they said, because this person who's dead may have been the robber. Because he was hungry, he may have tried to attack somebody to steal from them in order to get food, and the person he attacked killed them in self-defense. Right? But if we had properly fed him and cared for him, he wouldn't have had a reason to go out and attack someone. And therefore, we did not see him. Because if we had, he would have left fed, and he would have left protected. He would have been escorted. Make sense? Because when you don't escort, people die. All right? When you don't take care of each other, people end up dead, and they end up dead in that no-man land. And then very much, what happens with Joseph? As far as Jacob is concerned. He ends up dead in the no-man's land. So Jacob must have been feeling a fair bit of guilt, right? That maybe I should have escorted him further. Maybe I shouldn't have sent him. Maybe I didn't protect him properly. You know, what could I have done differently that my son would not have died? And so to be talking about the Egla Arufa as the idea of escorting becomes this beautiful thread that ties together the whole of Jacob and Joseph's last moments together, what Jacob thinks happens to Joseph, and then Joseph sending the wagons back to make that circle. And what's the Hebrew word for circle? Which comes from the exact same root. Sorry, just a little visual pun there, right? The word for circle is the same for wheel, and it goes for wagon. It's all connected.
And where are the brothers on the wheel? Are the brothers those people that we should not suspect would do something like that? Why should we have a ritual when we shouldn't have to suspect anybody?
Well, we shouldn't have to suspect anybody anyway, except there is a dead body. So somebody's a suspect because we got a dead person. And that means someone out there did the deed. But we're going to see that this theme of escorting is extremely powerful, not just for the protection of the person, but for the protection of other people from the person, up to and including protecting people from prophets. Very interesting story in the next quote.
Prophets spelled P-A-G-T-S or F-I-T-S?
The P-H.
P-R-O-P-H.
P-R-O-P-H-E-T-S.
Okay.
Prophets. Back in the spelling bee.
Yeah.
Not my strong suit.
Okay. Rabbi Yochanan said in the name of Rabbi Meir, whoever does not escort a stranger is as if he would shed blood, for had the inhabitants of Jericho escorted Elisha, it would never have happened that he should let a bear loose against the children, as it said in Kings.
Right. Now, you familiar with this story?
No.
All right, so you all know the story of Elijah and the end of Elijah's life with the fiery chariot and all of that. Yes, that boom, burned into our minds. Elisha was with him when that happened. Elisha leaves and comes back, and he is now wearing the mantle of Elijah. It's where the term of passing the mantle comes from. And he's the new sort of big prophet on the block. But he's also a little distraught, a little, upset. He just lost his mentor, and he comes to Jericho. People in Jericho say, "Hi, nice to meet you, bye." And as he leaves the town, he starts getting harassed by some children, teens, hoodlums. There's lots of different midrashim about who exactly these people were and how old they were when they were doing it. And he basically says, "Let a bear come and take care of you." And this she bear comes out of the forest, and
Wow.
they're dead. Yeah, it's rough. It's an extremely rough passage. And as you can see, the rabbis here are saying that the death of the children was partly that Elisha should not have had a bear kill them. There's some different versions of that, but at least this person is saying their deaths should have been avoided. But it wasn't just Elisha that was wrong for having the bear wipe them out. The people of the town were wrong for letting Elisha go alone. Here comes a guy who is a prophet of God. He is clearly upset because, after all, he passed this way with Elijah a minute ago, and now he's leaving without him. Something has happened. He's obviously sad. Maybe we should escort him as he goes. This is somebody who needs our help. But instead they didn't. And look what happens. Right? So even people that can take care of themselves need this escort. They need the levaya. They need other people there to help support them, or at least prevent them from doing damage to someone else.
Is that word escort, the levaya, is it the same word as, is it lamet that, or is it?
Spelling in Hebrew is
Okay,
even
no,
less.
even worse.
Yeah.
But is it from the same word as heart, or is it?
No.
It's
It's the vav,
The
I
vav,
believe.
yeah.
Yes, but it is the same word, however, that is used for the mitzvah during a funeral, for when we escort the deceased to the grave for burial. That is also called levaya.
And the Levites, it's the same.
Yes, that would be the same root. Yes, or at least the same spelling. Sometimes roots look the same but aren't always the same, but it would be the same spelling-ish. Yes, trying to visualize.
Or some connection anyway.
Yes.
It's very nice, the idea of escorting somebody, but how far do you have to escort them? Halfway to the town they're going to? You have to take them all the way? Nobody ever goes alone?
Well, and that's kind of the truck. The trouble, the trick is exactly how much escorting is necessary.
Like what immediately comes to mind is putting a kid on a plane.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, like, where is it that they're safe?
You ask the
to be
stewardess,
located?
no, you ask the stewardess to watch them.
Yeah, and that sometimes doesn't always work. There was a
Sometimes it
story just over the holidays where this 12-year-old kid was put on a plane, and they paid extra to have them be escorted the entire way, and they just pushed them off the plane at the destination and left. But luckily, the grandmother who was going to pick up the kid found them, and it was all okay. But it was like they found the kid just sitting there all alone.
Oh.
Yeah.
But if somebody is escorting
Mm-hmm.
another person,
Right.
now they have to return unescorted.
Oh, that's right.
Logic. Exactly.
So you have to have a group escort them.
So the idea would be that no one should ever really be alone, right? That this idea of escorting was a very powerful notion, and it wasn't just in Judaism, but in most ancient and classical cultures. People alone were vulnerable. People alone were subject to terrible things, or sometimes tempted to do terrible things because they were alone. And so having others around you provided a protection and a structure that kept you safe and kept everyone else safe from you. And that was considered to be a social good. But we're much more individualistic now, and much more of coming and going as we feel we want to go. And we've kind of lost that feel of protection and of interconnectedness. That we're constantly part of something, rather than I'm part of it when I want to be and not part of it all the rest of the time. So it is a different emotional state. And you're right, it would have been complicated. It would have been hard. But that was perfectly fine for people to work with. Or it would have been a short enough distance that I'd be walking back to my home and I can still see it from here. Let's go through a couple more examples of how this can work.
So it says in the Parsha, everything Joseph said to them. This suggests they included the memory of the final escort Joseph told them about as he escorted them out.
Okay, so Kliyakar, great Torah commentator, adds, okay, it wasn't just that he saw the wagon. It was, he actually told the brothers about that he and Jacob were walking, and that way they could convey that message. And when did he do that? He did it while he was escorting his brothers out, right? So he was fulfilling this mitzvah of escorting his brothers as they left Egypt. And then he reminded them to remind their father of what he and his father had last been talking about when his father was escorting him. Now, all of this is not just a question of, the secret code to let dad know that I'm still here. But this is also implying, let dad know I'm not Egyptian. And I'm second in charge of Egypt, but I'm not Egyptian. I still know what was important for our people. I still follow the ways of our people. I'm still what we would now call Jewish. Right? He wouldn't have named himself after his brother Judah yet, but I'm still Hebrew, not Egyptian. Right? I'm still part of the family, and I still keep our family ways. And that is going to become very important for Jewish identity throughout the time in Egypt, and of course Jewish identity throughout the diaspora forever, is that we may not be living there, but we're still doing it. We're still keeping our ways even in these strange lands. And sometimes it takes a little convincing to convince people who are in the homeland, whether that was old Europe or whether that's Israel. No, really, we are still Jewish, even though we don't live where you think Judaism is at the only place it exists. Okay.
And in Genesis, we had read originally, and he sent his brethren away, and they departed, and he said to them, do not quarrel on
All
the
right.
way.
So this verse is the proof of what Clear Carr just said, because read it very carefully. What's the order of events?
Well, really, first he sends his brothers away,
Mm-hmm.
and then the thing that Joseph said to them is later when they get to his father, they say that.
No. So they sent them away. You got that.
Oh, and they departed.
And they depart. And he said to them, how can he say
so
to
they
them
departed.
after they have departed, if they have departed? Because he's with them. He's escorting them. So they've begun their trip, but he's still going with them.
So the they includes Joseph.
Exactly.
The brothers and
Exactly. All right, guys, time to go.
Yeah.
And we all start the journey together. And as long as we're walking, I will explain to you, don't fight on the way. There's another great midrash that says, what was he telling them not to fight about? He was trying to tell them, don't fight about whose fault it was that you sold me. Right? I don't want you doing the recriminations and the Monday morning quarterbacking. Well, if we just left him in the pit, I would have come back, says Reuben, and I would have picked him up. Or if we hadn't sold him, you was Judah, you said we should sell him. When we get back, Dad's going to kill us, and Joseph is probably going to kill us once he has us in his clutches down in Egypt. Right? And Joseph is telling them, don't fight about this, guys, okay? As I said earlier, this was what God needed to happen to save our people because of the famine. So it's okay. Don't fight. Because he doesn't want them to end up dead somewhere along the road because they started fighting with each other. Don't quarrel. Make sense? Mish? Ish. I know, the commentators are very deep. All right, and from the Mechilta?
And the Lord went before them by day. We are hereby taught.
All right, so let me
Yes,
just
please.
verse out of context.
Right. The Lord went before them by day.
So we're in the book of Exodus now, and Mechilta is a very early midrashic exegesis of the book of Exodus. And in the Mechilta, it's saying, what does it mean God went before them by day? You'll remember the pillar of fire and the cloud, right? This is what he's talking about. Why was God going before us during the day? Well, there's a reason.
We are hereby taught that as one metes it out to others, so it is meted out to him.
Which sounds much nicer in the Hebrew. Midah kineged midah, right? It's a much more elegant phrase, that as you do, so happens to you.
Karma.
Or karma, you might even say in the modern vernacular, right? But, as one meets it out to others, so is it meted out to him is just hard to say.
Yeah.
But that's the basic idea. So because of what you do, something happens to you in return, which, by the way, is all over the Joseph story, right? When Judah confronts his father, what happens? Tamar ends up confronting him, right? It's all the ways that they behave ends up coming back as a mirror to themselves. Tit for tat, exactly. So, and also Jacob's life, right? He deceives his parents, so he gets tricked into marrying the wrong woman. It's midah and neged midah is all over the Torah. Unfortunately, it doesn't have highlights, or footnotes to point it out. The reader has to notice it for him or herself. So, how does that explain why God is going with us in the wilderness?
Abraham accompanied the ministering angels. In Genesis, it says, and Abraham went with them to escort them.
Right. So at the end of meeting the angels who give the prophecy that Isaac is going to be born, when they leave, Abraham escorts them. Right. Abraham escorts them. Keep going.
And the Lord accompanied his children in the desert for 40 years.
Right. So Abraham escorts God's angels. God escorts Abraham's children. Right. It's, as you say, tit for tat. It's midah keneged midah. That as you do, so does it happen to you. So escort, it's a cycle, right? When you escort, others escort for you. Good? Yes? Okay. I just wanted to finish, because we don't have a lot of time, but it's this great story. This is from the Vilna Gaon time. And it's all about how do you prove somebody is who they say they are when 22 years, or in this case, 30 years have gone by. It's a cute story.
Okay. During the time of the Vilna Gaon, a very strange incident took place in his city. A young couple had gotten married, and shortly afterward, the husband vanished without a trace. The poor wife was left an aguna, a living widow, unable to remarry because her husband might still be alive.
All right, so we know the plight of the agunot, right? These are women whose husbands have disappeared, and they don't have a get or proof of death, and therefore they cannot remarry. And that's not a good situation to be in.
30 years passed, and then one fine day, a man appeared on her doorstep and declared, "My dear wife, I'm back."
All right. 30 years later, I went out for some cigarettes, right? But they hadn't been invented yet, so it took a while. So 30 years later, the guy shows up. I remember they were just newlyweds when he disappeared. So how in the world can he prove who he is?
Then he told her a long story about what had kept him from returning for so many years.
So many traffic lights.
The woman looked at the man and did not recognize him as her husband. But then again, she couldn't be sure that he wasn't. 30 years wreaks changes on a person. They also fade the memory, especially in those times when there were no photographs.
Right? Not like she was looking at pictures of her husband every week.
Even if she were, they would have been quite different than 30
For 30 years later, exactly. I might still bear a passing resemblance to my 20-year-old self, but
Yeah.
yeah.
The man was about the same build and coloring as her husband. His features were not really dissimilar. His face was weathered by time and the elements, and it was difficult to imagine what he might have looked like 30 years earlier. It was not impossible that this was her husband, and yet he did not seem familiar.
All right, so you're stuck. Now, from the woman's point of view, she is in a difficult position, right? Because what are her two alternatives, right? Accept him or not accept him. What are the consequences? No, right? So let's imagine that she accepts him, right? And that he's not really her husband. Adultery.
Oh.
Adultery, right? If she accepts him as her husband, but he's not really her husband, then she is and he are now committing adultery, right? On the other hand, if she rejects him and it's truly her husband, then indeed she stays in aguna and they stay separate, even though they have an opportunity to be together, and vice versa. If she rejects him and he's not really her husband, then that's fine. But if she rejects him and it really is her husband, it's that's pain.
Yeah.
Well, without some proof, this is a hard situation, right? You can't just say, close enough, welcome home.
I've been alone long enough, come on in.
That doesn't work that way.
She expressed her reservations to the man, and he was very understanding. "Test me," he said. "Ask me any question about our life together. See if I know the answers." So she asked him questions, and he had all the answers. He knew all about their families, their wedding day, their home, including some intimate details that only the two of them could have known. Still, she remained suspicious, and she decided to seek the advice of the Beit Din.
Always a good idea.
The Dayanim of the Beit Din interrogated the man extensively, but they could not catch him in a mistake. He was very convincing, and yet his wife was not convinced, which was certainly a cause for suspicion.
So again, imagine the brothers never recognized Joseph. Right? He's standing there right in front of them as the vizier of Egypt. They did not recognize him at all. He recognized them, but then he had 10 to work with. He only had to recognize one of them for the rest to fall into place. Imagine for Jacob, who has been mourning for his son for over 20 years. Is he going to accept this Egyptian guy as being his son? What proof could you possibly give?
So they sought the counsel of the Vilna Gaon. "Take the man to the shul," said the Gaon. "Asked him to point out his makom kavua, the place where he normally sat." Oh, because we all have our place in shul. Where
Exactly
we sit.
right, right? If you were to go to shul,
Yes.
right, and someone were to say, well, where do you normally sit? You could point, well, I usually sit right there, right behind Mrs. So-and-so
Right.
and next to Mr. Such and such, right? Or, well, actually sometimes when it's crowded, I'll sit one row back or over to the side, or sometimes I'd like to be on the way. You would know your place, and you probably know the people in your shul that you are friendly or familiar with, yes? We could all map, if I gave you a blank of the shul, you could write in the names of who sits where. Okay.
They took him to the shul and asked him to point to his seat. The man hemmed and hawed, but he could not do it. Then he broke down and admitted that he had learned all his information from the husband whom he had befriended many years earlier.
Right? But one thing he never thought to ask him was, where do you sit in shul? Right? So we can talk about our families, we can talk about our business and about our wedding day and all of that, and enough that you could really pass yourself off as someone else. But where do you sit in shul? What do you remember of your Judaism, of your Torah? Is where I'd like to bring this back. That is something that only the person knows. And that was the message that Joseph gave Jacob. Right? What do you still know of the Torah that we learned together? What do you prove to me that you are not just some Egyptian pretender who tortured this information from a slave? Right? Show me what you really still remember. And what does he remember? He remembers the Zegla Arufa. And he remembers being escorted by his father when he left, and how his father told him that it was so important to escort people. And he escorts his own brothers when they're leaving, and he tries to protect them, partly by telling them not to fight with one another. And he sends a wagon that only he and only somebody with that kind of weird, twisted Hebrew pun-making mind would think that a wagon and a cow would somehow make you think of the two, make you think of a link between the two of them. And it works. Right? When Jacob sees the wagons, he realizes that not only is his son still alive, but his son is still his son. His son is still a Hebrew, he's still a descendant of Abraham and Isaac, and that it's a miracle. And that's why he says, enough, it's enough that he's alive. It's enough that he is still him. And let me go. And then he goes down, and we, of course, if you keep reading, there's this wonderful reunion scene. And I'll leave it on that cliffhanger, like I said, from the Lone Ranger. And you'll have to see what happens in the final reconciliation. All right, good. Keep the wagons moving.